Paris, before cafes, before boulevards, before the Eiffel Tower. In the 1600s, this city was loud, crowded, and ruled by the river. Kings walked among merchants, bridges were packed with houses, and the Seine could freeze solid. This is Paris at the moment it begins to change. Step into the city of 1640. Paris in the mid-1600s was a city in transition. It still carried the dense shape and rhythms of the medieval world, but the foundations of a modern capital were already being laid. Royal squares, carefully planned streets, and grand palaces were beginning to guide the city's growth beyond its old walls. At the same time, everyday life remained crowded, noisy, and deeply tied to the River Seine. This video uses original engravings, maps, and paintings from the period to give a clear sense of how Paris looked and felt between 1640 and 1660. Let's take a slow walk through the city as it stood in the early reign of Louis XIV. The Palais Royal. We begin in one of the most important new spaces of the century, the Palais Royal. In the mid-1600s, this was one of the busiest and most influential places in Paris. Originally built by Cardinal Richelieu, the palace was not just a residence, but a center of political power. When Richelieu died in 1642, he left the palace to the king. After the death of Louis XIII, it became the home of Anne of Austria, the Queen Regent, and her young son, the future Louis XIV. Decisions made within these walls shaped the direction of France during a fragile and uncertain period. The surrounding streets buzzed with activity. Courtiers, messengers, guards, and servants moved constantly through the area, giving the neighborhood a sense of urgency and importance. Place Royale, today known as Place des Vosges. This was one of the earliest planned squares in Paris and a revolutionary idea at the time. Designed under Henry IV, it introduced symmetry, uniform facades, and controlled space into an otherwise chaotic medieval city. The square quickly became fashionable. Aristocrats built townhouses around it, and its design would inspire royal squares across Europe. Walking here in the 1600s meant entering a space that felt ordered, elegant, and deliberately modern. Next, we arrive at the Pont Neuf, shown here around 1660. Despite its name, the New Bridge was already decades old, but it remained one of the most important landmarks in Paris. The Pont Neuf was more than a bridge, it was a social stage. People came here to trade goods, spread gossip, perform tricks, beg, flirt, argue, and observe the endless movement of the city. Street performers and merchants competed for attention, while crowds gathered to watch public events. One famous painting shows Louis XIV crossing the bridge during a ceremonial entry into Paris, a powerful image linking royal authority to the everyday life of the city. Now we move toward the Tuileries Palace and gardens. Only fragments of the palace survive today, but in the 1600s it was one of the main royal residences. The gardens represented a major shift in French landscape design. Created under the influence of André Le Nôtre, the gardens followed strict geometry, symmetry, and perspective. Nature here was not wild, it was controlled, measured, and shaped to reflect reason and order. Walking these paths meant stepping into a carefully designed vision of how power and harmony should appear. Along the River Seine. Just beyond the formal gardens, the city softens. Near the edges of the Tuileries and along the Seine, we find quieter spaces where the river dominates the scene. Trees line the banks, boats drift slowly by, and people pause to watch fishermen work or to talk near the water. This was where Parisians escaped the crowded streets for a slower rhythm of life. The river was always present, carrying goods, people, and information through the heart of the city. The frozen Seine. One of the most surprising images from this period shows the Seine frozen solid during the harsh winter of 1608. The climate was colder in the early modern period, and when the river froze, Parisians turned it into a playground. Skaters glide across the ice, children slide and run, small groups gather around fires to stay warm, while others simply watch from the banks. It's a rare moment where the river, normally a working artery, becomes a place of leisure and joy. Hôtel de Ville. Now we arrive at the Hôtel de Ville, Paris's city hall. This building symbolized civic authority, but it was also a stage for celebration. In one engraving, crowds fill the square as fireworks explode overhead. Public spectacle played a vital role in 17th-century France, reinforcing unity, loyalty, and civic pride. The Hôtel de Ville shown here is not the one we see today. The modern building is a 19th-century reconstruction. The original structure was smaller, richly decorated, and crowned with steep roofs and ornate windows. Another engraving focuses on its architecture, symmetry, balance, and order. The square in front was alive with markets, performers, official announcements, and daily conversation. To feel the pulse of Paris, this was the place to be. Ile de la Cité and Notre Dame. We now return to the heart of Old Paris, the Ile de la Cité. This island is where the city began. Rising above it is Notre Dame Cathedral, shown here in its original medieval form. No spire, no modern restorations, just the structure as its builders intended. Houses crowd the riverbanks, many standing directly over the water. Bridges were lined with buildings, turning crossings into narrow streets filled with shops and workshops. Crossing a bridge felt less like crossing water and more like passing through a busy neighborhood. Monasteries and daily life. Here we see the Seine again near the Augustinian convent. The river never rests. Ferries cross back and forth, barges unload goods, fishermen work along the banks, and laborers haul cargo ashore. Monasteries and convents played a major role in city life. They provided education, charity, and stability. Their bells marked time throughout the day, structuring daily routines in a world without modern clocks. Luxembourg Palace and Gardens. We now entered the Luxembourg Palace and Gardens, built for Marie de Medici. The palace brought Italian influence into Parisian architecture, while the gardens stretched out in perfect symmetry. People walked the paths to enjoy fresh air and long views. From the terraces, one could look across the rooftops of the left bank. These gardens were both a place of leisure and a statement of power. Maps of Paris. We end our journey with detailed maps of the city. The great engraving by Claes Johns Vischer captures Paris with extraordinary precision. Churches, walls, bridges, gardens, and suburbs drawn in obsessive detail. Another map, the 1615 plan by Matthias Merian, shows Paris as a compact world enclosed by walls, split by the Seine. Narrow medieval streets coexist with the first long, straight avenues that hint at the city's future. These maps remind us how dense Paris was. Buildings pressed tightly together, markets filled every square, life spilled constantly into the streets. The city gates. At the edge of the city stands Porte Saint-Bernard, one of the main entrances to Paris in the 1600s. Goods entered here, travelers arrived here, officials controlled access and collected taxes. Below the bridge, boats unload barrels while people gathered to trade or talk. If you arrived in Paris by river, this was one of your first views, the city rising ahead of you, busy, noisy, and alive. Paris, before cafes, before boulevards, before the Eiffel Tower. In the 1600s, this city was loud, crowded, and ruled by the river. Kings walked among merchants, bridges were packed with houses, and the Seine could freeze solid. This is Paris at the moment it begins to change. Step into the city of 1640.